Hello, and welcome to the From Truth to Action podcast. I'm Jay Hurtubise, Director of Community Standards at Framingham State.
And I'm Ben Trapanick, Director of New Student and Family Programs, also at Framingham State. And we're honored to be bringing you this limited series, exploring the ways that biases and systemic racism impact our communities. Each episode will be looking at personal stories and real events with our guests in order to frame our discussion and lead us to anti-racist action.
As always, we want to provide our audience with a trigger warning due to the deeply sensitive and often traumatic nature of racism, inequity, and injustice. We also encourage you to practice effective self-care, however that looks for you. And we remind you about your on-campus support resources, which may include counseling centers, campus ministries, and also campus contacts for multicultural affairs, diversity, or inclusive excellence.
Sometimes I have to get off social media and stop watching the news because it can be overwhelming. If you're constantly watching police harm somebody, it feels like they're attacking a family member and you can't do anything about it. And then what makes it even more stressful is when you realize that you have to fight your hardest and turn the world upside down just to get justice. I realize that a lot of Black people have PTSD from being racially profiled and with brutality. We fight for laws to be changed or made. But at the end of the day, if it's enforced by a racist structure, there will ultimately not be any change. Alante, 29.
Welcome again to the From Truth to Action podcast. My name is Jay Hurtubise. I'm joined by my co-host, Ben Trapanick. Say hi, Ben.
Hey, Jay.
Great to have you here with us, as always. And we're joined by our esteemed guest today, Officer Darryl W. Owens of Boston Police. Darryl, welcome.
Thanks. Well, it's good to be here. It's good to be here.
We're very honored to have you. We're glad you could join us. And Darryl, for our audience, I know that we spent a little time getting to know each other before, but for our audience, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, and your interest in the topic of our podcast today?
Sure. Well, so I've been a Boston police officer for almost 32 years. I'm quickly approaching my 32nd anniversary as a Boston police officer. And even that is interesting for me to hear myself say. Even now, it surprises me because of how I grew up. I grew up in Boston, in the inner city of Boston, in and around the inner city neighborhoods. We moved so many times that I don't actually claim one. I've lived all over the inner city in Boston. And the reason why it's so interesting for me to say that I'm a Boston police officer and I've been this way for 30-something years is because my first interaction with the Boston police was seeing them arrest my father in our living room. They had followed him home from work. He was involved in some criminal things. I don't want to really get into it here, but he ended up getting arrested. They arrested him in our living room. I can remember the police. One of the police officers not even making eye contact with me and my brother who watched all this happen, and they took him away. And he ended up spending the rest of his life in prison. He was actually murdered a couple of years after that. So all this traumatic stuff is in my memory of the Boston police. And then my second memory of the Boston police was I was just innocently, maybe not so innocently, according to this police detective, watching a fight between two teenage girls. And in order to get to the fight, to break it up, this police detective hit me over the head with something hard. I still don't know what it is to this day. So that was my second interaction. And then, way back in 1989, because some things weren't working out for me in my life. And on a dare, I took the police exam, the civil service exam. I got a really good score in a really short time. And they began recruiting me heavily. I was number one on the list. And then I went to the academy and the rest is history. And so at this point in my life, I'm 55 years old. I'm approaching retirement, which is awesome. And at this point in my life, I am a self-defense and use of force instructor at the Boston Police Academy. And I also do some community-related things with the Boston Police Department. My proudest claim to fame is I run the Boston Police Teen Academy, which is a great thing where we bring young kids in from the inner city to give them experience in summer jobs and educational opportunities. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest version of who I am. There's probably a lot more that I'm skipping over, but that's about what I can remember right now.
And Darryl, thanks for sharing all that background information and your experience with police. But also, I think, in reading up on your bio, you're the one who started that team program as well in the Boston Police Department. You don't just direct it, but you started it as well.
Yeah, I started it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which it says a lot too, that you've not only directed, but you created it, you imagined it, and you created it and got it implemented too. So that says a lot too. So.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. It was kind of, the program sort of created itself from an experience I had. Being a police trainer for as long as I have, one of the things I do, one of the reasons I get home late at night is because I keep the academy open for officers around the city, and they can bring youth to the academy for tours and for talks with me, or whatever. And there was one time we brought this one particular young man in, and two officers that I had trained brought him in. Now, he's having a rough time, but also he was being a little bit disrespectful and distant, which was fine with me. I understood him, and he was wearing his pants really low, and I was just going to ignore it. One of the officers who brought him in, they were all officers of color, but one of the officers brought him in, told him to pull up his pants, and he made a fresh remark. And I asked him, "Hey, buddy, it's okay, just relax." And then he kind of turned his anger towards me, and these two cops really yelled at him, and I couldn't believe it. So I sent them out. I sent them out of the academy to wait in their car, and I just took some time really connecting with this young man. And I remember I told a friend about this event. He said, "You should run something where kids can come to you." And so I started with, this was way back in like 2009, 2010. I started with 5 boys from some of the hardest hit gang neighborhoods in the city. And by now, in 2020, we've had 425 kids come through the Teen Academy. And it's been incredibly impactful. Even at the Boston Police Academy right now, in the class, I have 2 of my kids who came through Teen Academy who are going to graduate as law enforcement officers in a few months. So it's a very cool program. It's the joy of my life. And
Can I ask a follow-up? You say, if you don't mind me asking a follow-up, Darryl, you say it's been impactful. Clearly, it's been impactful that you're seeing some students, some forms want to be police.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's plenty of other ways that it's been impactful in the community as well.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it's so many ways. Just top 3 or 4 stories. We had one young man who came to the Teen Academy, and on a career day, we brought in some lawyers, some businessmen, and a professor from Suffolk University. This young man made a connection with this professor from Suffolk. He went to Suffolk, majored in business. Now he's working in the financial district in Boston, making really good money, living in an apartment in the South End, just doing awesome. And he credits the Teen Academy. We've also had, we've also been able to spot some needs that we wouldn't normally see. I have the Teen Academy is staffed by a bunch of police officers from all over the city. We've had students who've had undiagnosed special needs, who needed an independent educational plan, and because some of the speakers that come in, we got them hooked up with that. We unfortunately have had many kids that were that, like me, were in situations where their parents were not as responsible as they could be, or involved in some crime, and we were able to pull them out of those situations. And I think one of my favorite stories, I don't know why this registers with me, we had a young lady last year who was lagging. She was a high school sophomore. She was lagging in her schoolwork, and we brought in a bunch of computer and robotics nerds from Brandeis University on one of our career days. And she just loved the whole idea of what STEM could do, of what science, technology, and mathematics could do. And she is right now, she's a junior. She's a straight A student, and she's taking classes at Roxbury Community College and a summer class at BU, and she's trying to get into a fall camp at MIT, and it's all because of something we were able to expose her to. The police are really, when we do it right, we're in a really unique position to use our influence to connect people who we serve with people who are interested in serving the people who we serve. So the Teen Academy does just that, and it's been blow away. Sometimes I'm jealous of my kids. I wish I had Teen Academy when I was growing up.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you for that. You're doing great work with that, Darryl. I'm glad I asked the question, because we needed to know more than the fact that you just directed. We needed to know more than that. So,
and it sounds, Darryl, like, yeah, thanks, man. I was going to say, it sounds like you're much more than just a police officer. You know, your title of officer doesn't seem to encapsulate everything that you're doing and everything you're contributing. You know, you're an educator. You know, you're in the same business as Ben and I here, and that's really awesome to hear. The wonderful success stories that you've been talking about.
Thanks.
One of the things that really kind of resonated with me with what you were just saying is that when you were talking about your personal story and your experience as you were, taking your journey to becoming a police officer with all the different ways that you would interact with police, it sounded like it mirrored a little bit with Alante's story that we heard at the beginning of the podcast. What are your initial reactions to those words from Alante? Because these words, I want to mention to our audience too, came from a Stat News article. It's an independent news outlet where they had taken sort of the voices of people of color, and they were really looking at the effects of how it was affecting healthcare and the health of people of color during the pandemic. But we got a lot of really good information, such as stuff with interactions with police. But yeah, what were those initial thoughts as you heard those words?
The initial thoughts is I'm grateful. I'm grateful to hear his words. I think that kind of growing up in the time I did. Now we had our spells. I had my spells of social consciousness. You know, I was a teenager. I was into Malcolm X and Public Enemy and all those things that all of us were into then. And I think that in some way, when I first became a police officer, there was, I had thought that all those issues were in my past, that the family that I came from, the trauma that I came from, the racism that I felt was in my past. And then this modern era happened, and I'm very proud of people like Alante, who can speak his truth so powerfully. And I agree with everything he said. I think that one of the things I do in my training of police officers, I very much focus on the fact that we're dealing with humans. And I love what you said a minute ago, Jay, that I sound like I'm more than a police officer. That's because I am. I'm a human being. And my heart wants to take care of human beings. And my heart, and I know who I am. I'm a Black man, and I'm from the hood. I mean, and I'm loyal to that. And I still have family that still live in the inner city, and I love them, and I want to take care of them. And beyond that, I feel a very communal connection with Black people. It feels like when I see someone like George Floyd being murdered, when I hear about Breonna Taylor, when I see Tamir Rice or Eric Garner or Freddie Gray, I feel like they're my family. And so it does in a big way harm me. Now, unfortunately, I do put on these clothes, these blue clothes, and go to work. And sometimes when those things happen, people would say, "Oh, Darryl, you must be feeling this really tough. It must be really tough to be a police officer right now." And that's been a real big pull for me. I know that's a job that I've chosen. My life isn't blue. that's not a thing. My life is, I have a Black wife. I'm married to a Black wife. I have 2 Black children. And so the community that I respond to and I identify with is my heritage. And so I feel all the things that Alante was talking about, even though I've been on this job for most of my life at this point. I've been a police officer longer than I've been anything else. And so, but I've been Black longer than that, and I'm gonna be Black after that, and I'm gonna be human after that. So I have a very human connection with what Alante said, with what Black people feel, and with the damage that these senseless, illegal, and cowardly acts of violence have produced in the Black community.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those thoughts. There's one thing I want to loop us back to eventually, which was one on the last story that you told about not the last one with the student who was very successful with the grades now, but the one about the student who was brought in by the other 2 officers. Mm-hmm. You took time, right? You took the time to get to know this person so that they could get to know you, right? And for me, it almost seemed like prophetic, or like we're kind of alluding to the future here, because it really kind of speaks to the fact that, why we're doing this podcast. We're taking the time to get to know people, to get to know the issues, and so that we can fully understand things, and that it takes time for us to take steps. And Alante refers to that as well, right? He talks about how, we fight for laws and changes to be made. And that whole process takes a lot of time. But I guess I wonder what your thoughts are about what he said in his last statement, which is, if it's enforced by a racist structure, there ultimately won't be any change, and you're making a lot of headway in your work. And I'm wondering how you feel about that statement.
Wow. What a great question. I lose sleep at night over it, because my career is coming to a close. I'm taking a curtain call here in a little while, and sometimes I'm afraid. I get afraid of losing the steam that I've been able to build up over a career, with the credibility I have, with the associations I have, with the power and privilege that comes with my job. I feel like I've really turned it and have tried to make headway, but I get afraid that somebody's not going to pick up the torch. So I have a bully pulpit at the police academy, and I've trained over 2,000 police officers in my career. And I call it a bully pulpit because I get up at the academy to teach, and I am preaching, without a doubt. I am talking to them about the fact that they're human. I'm talking to them about the fact that there may come a time when the job is violent, but it is not. It was never designed to be a violent job. That's only partially true, because police departments started forming when slavery ended. So in part, they were formed to control Black folks. But in the modern era, policing does not have to be a violent job. It's a job that may have to be violent at times. But it's a service job. It is a service job. So as much as I use my energy to teach self-defense and to teach the officers to defend each other, I also teach a course called Effective Communication, and it's a really good, really dynamic course. And I challenge my students, whether they're new recruits or department captains, I challenge them to hear how to connect with people. So I get scared. I get scared that some of the work I've done won't continue. And I have a deep knowledge and a deep fear that Boston can sometimes be considered a city on the hill. We've got our problems, but I get concerned and afraid about what else is going on around the country. And I bring those matters to my students. If a video comes out, there was one out of Rochester just about a month ago where a 9-year-old girl got arrested and put in handcuffs. And then you can hear one of the officers, she's in the back seat of the car. And you can hear one of the officers say, "Oh, just spray her now." And they sprayed a 9-year-old girl with pepper spray. And as soon as I got it, I usually don't do this. As soon as I got it, I brought it to the 97 recruits who are in the Boston Police Academy. And they were, to a person, to a human, outraged. And I asked them why, and they said, because you trained us that we don't have to do that if the person is in handcuffs. And she's 9 years old. And she just wanted her dad. Somebody could have got on the cell phone and called her dad and had her dad meet him. And they treated her like this. And these are the humans I train are of all races. And right now we have this phenomenon in policing where we're drawing, and it's continuing, right? We're drawing a lot of white males. And the white male students were like, I asked them, what would you have done? And they said, to a person, I would have called the father. There's nothing dangerous about a 9-year-old having a fit. There's nothing, 9-year-olds have fits. That's what they do. And no matter what she did before, she didn't deserve to be treated like that. So, so Boston, I can speak for Boston. Boston, the academy staff is diverse and courageous, and we challenge each other, and we insist on the best from each other, and we're very well led, and we challenge each other, and so. But I get concerned about what else is going on. I won't name the states, but there's some states that I ain't going to and driving down the street without my license in order, because it's just not. I'm just afraid.
Yeah.
You know, just one, Jay, if I could just add one thing, I think, we'll into a little bit, Darryl, what you described too is in the end of that statement, talks about the system, like, as much as you do, the system is working against you, whether it's criminal justice system, whether it's in the education system that Jay and I operate in. There are so many systems that are operating against you that it can seem overwhelming. And I don't, and I fully acknowledge, I don't have a lot of the barriers that are put in front of other people. But it's frustrating because I work with some colleagues who are very frustrated. Like, our students are suffering right now. We just had an incident in our campus last week. And our students don't feel like there's enough being done in some cases. And there is so much work being done on our campus, fortunately, by a lot of different people. But it's also a case of the system is slow. The system, doesn't always create for them the space to, like, things are getting better. And I know, not only from your role, but just from, living in Boston, I'm sure you can relate to some of what you heard from that quote. Like, the system still doesn't change, regardless of protests that happen or things like that. And I can, I can relate in that regards, because some of our students are struggling that same way. And it's, for us, it's like the system, like, we got to change coursework, we got to change general education, and that's a huge, an education side, that's a huge process. You don't just go say, I want to have diversity courses, or I want to have courses be about this, this, and this. It's an enormous process to do all that. And I'm sure that you face a lot of that too in your role, and you've seen it in criminal justice as well.
Yeah. I'm one person. I'm one person. And when I had this interaction with this young man at the teen academy, at the police academy, who came on tour, I called a good friend of mine who is also a police officer, and he said, do something. And those words, they ring in my head all the time. And I know that, and maybe what I'm doing is just a little bit, but I've got 425 lives that I've changed, because I said, I've got some power, I've got some privilege, I've got a past, a history that makes me deeply understand family dysfunction and living in the inner city and being a subject of racism. I'm gonna do this. This is what I'm gonna do. And there have been a ton of obstacles. There have been a ton of procedural, systemic obstacles, but I've been stubborn. And I've talked to the people I need to talk to, and there's 425 people. Now, not everybody has the privilege that I do, and not every man of color has the access I do to being a part of this system. But imagine if every person could affect some other people. If it's not 425, maybe it's 25, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 2. But if everybody who gets a conviction and gets moved says, this is what I'm in the position to do. I'm not in this position for no reason. I don't have the past for no reason. I think systems get changed by one person at a time, getting a conviction and doing something. I'm not a big poster on social media. I'm not a big reactor to politics on social media, although I have my opinions, but I vote. I'm not a big shamer of individuals and systems, although that's effective. I have a conviction in my heart that I'm going to work. I'm going to keep myself busy. I'm going to work until it's time to not work. And then I'm going to figure out how to still work. The Teen Academy, we just this week, we voted into existence the Boston Teen Police Academy Foundation. We have a board of directors. We have a mechanism set in place where we're gonna streamline our curriculum. We've raised some money to do some marketing, and once I retire, my goal is to see these teen academies being spread around the country to broaden this impact. I've seen it work. I know it can work. I've seen the lives that have been changed far more than the kids. It's not a recruiting tool. It's not at all a recruiting tool. It can serve as one, but I've never wanted it to be one. I want it to be a connection tool. I want it to be a way to connect and to serve people. A police officer is a mobile unit of a mobile connector of people. A police officer can go in the most secure places, can go into a penthouse, can go into a hospital and talk to the director of the hospital, can go to a college and get a word in with the director of the college. And a police officer will and can talk to people who are in the lowest of circumstances. It's a great opportunity to connect. Unfortunately, because of the system that we have, because of the inherent racism in the system, oftentimes departments are slow to understand that, those well-versed communicator connectors, they don't always just have to go to the low crime areas. Put them in the inner city, put them in the high crime areas, and let them work their magic there. Boston does get that. Boston is sending good communicators into the city. Now we have all kinds, and every job has all kinds. But man, I just wish that people would, and not everybody. Protests are good. I think that they're good. But I wish that people would use their power to begin to affect individuals, because sometimes when we go after the whole thing at one time, it's just so huge. But if we take one bite of the apple at a time, we can succeed. The old joke, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Yeah. Bite at a time.
It's funny. You mentioned that as soon as Ben was talking about how much of an endeavor it is, and as you were just mentioning there, I actually saw myself in the camera, take this big inhale of preparing myself for how much there is to do. But I really love that you said that. It really is. It's one bite at a time, one person at a time, one conversation where you took the time at a time. It matters that we care about it, that we show the people that we care about it too. So there are some other kind of systemic things that I know we wanted to kind of talk about. You've given us so much already about some routes that maybe police departments can take, ways that we as community members can engage, and we'll get back to that. But I know Ben was looking at having us talk a little bit about some disparities that exist, and just having our audience kind of understand where, society is at with those disparities. Ben?
Yeah. So Darryl, I'm doing a little research for this, and we're going to talk about the criminal justice system as a whole. All right.
Okay.
So let me I kind of have this question. So in 2018, there was a report presented to the United Nations that focused specifically on racial disparities in the U.S. criminal justice system. One of the first things that report shares is that, and I quote, the United States operates two distinct criminal justice systems, one for wealthy people and another for poor people and people of color. The wealthy can access a vigorous adversary system replete with constitutional protections for defendants. Yet the experiences of poor people and minority defendants within the criminal justice system often differ substantially from that model due to a number of factors, each of which contributes to the overrepresentation of such individuals in the system. Mm-hmm. So it's a really general statement and it's huge. And I know there's, talking about the elephant in one bite at a time. But can you, from your experience, can you describe what, potentially what they mean by this wealthy system and the discrepancy between the other system that they're talking about, the one for poor people and people of color, just from your experiences?
Well, maybe not my experiences so much, but from what I've learned, I'm gonna give you two words: Bernie Madoff. Do you remember when Bernie Madoff was arrested? Do you remember when he was arrested? So he came out of his penthouse, down in an elevator with two police officers or agents or whoever they were, dressed up in nice, tailored-looking suits. He was handcuffed, but he was handcuffed in front of his body, and he had his Oxford shirt on. It was he didn't have on a tie. He had it open. He had his slacks on, and over the cuffs there was ever so gently and stylishly draped an overcoat, so that juries would not see the picture of Bernie Madoff being escorted out of his building with his hands behind his back with two angry-looking uniformed police officers. Bernie Madoff hurt so many people and bankrupted so many people and stole so much money that the numbers still haven't been fully calculated. I'll give you two other words: Eric Garner. Eric Garner was selling loose cigarettes, by the way, in the same exact city that Bernie Madoff was arrested in. Eric Garner was selling loosies. And so a plainclothes unit of that city's police department was having some kind of inquiry or interaction with Eric Garner, and he got really kind of angry, and some people might say rude, but in return, one of the officers leapt up and grabbed him around the throat, brought him to the ground, and we know, and the whole world knows what happened next. And so I tell those two stories to my students, and I say, "What's the difference?" And they say, "Well, okay, so Bernie Madoff was walking out and he was under," I said, "Do you really think that Bernie Madoff was polite to those police officers when they were in his penthouse? Or do you think he was a jerk? Do you think he was a jerk? I mean, but still he had the time to comb his hair, to put on that shirt, to be cuffed in front, have that coat or jacket ever so gently draped over his handcuffs so no juror would see Bernie Madoff paraded in handcuffs." The answer is, I think your answer is there. There are two systems. Yes, that is true. I told you in two bites of the elephant kind of way, but I think that the comparison is stark, right? And there are many differences, right? Bernie Madoff was a millionaire financier, or so people thought, and Eric Garner was a bodega owner. Bernie Madoff is Caucasian. Eric Garner was black. So two separate systems, one for rich white, one for poor everybody else, and especially poor black.
And just for the record, for a lot of people who may not know Bernie Madoff, he was I don't even know what the word is, the originator of one of the biggest Ponzi schemes, if not the biggest Ponzi scheme ever. And when you say, Darryl, that so many people lost money because of him, I think that's a general understatement. He was not only, he was managing money, if you will, for the incredibly wealthy. Like one of them was the New York Mets owner, whose team lost incredible amount of value because of that. So and that's why people know him, because of the money that he was managing. He wasn't just managing a Ponzi scheme; he was managing specific people's money. So what when you talk about these are great examples, Darryl. When you talk about the discrepancy between the different systems, what does that do to a community from what you've seen and what you know? When they compare the two, when people listen to this and they compare the two, what does that do for the community?
It damages the community. Again, I think I said it at the beginning of the podcast, Eric Garner registers as family to me. I have a cousin who looks like Eric Garner. And I see my cousin begging for breath and begging for life, and so the communal thinking of Black people goes back to the lynching era, right? Lynchings were not private. They were public. They were very graphic and public, and people brought their children to lynching. And then when that person had been lynched, they brought that body, that corpse, to the heart of the Black community and left him there. So not only did they lynch the person, they lynched the community. And so what it does to us, it produces this angst, this outcry. What we've seen played across the nation's landscape over the past years, it produces this because we're tired. Sometimes I feel like I told my wife the other day that racism to me feels like I'm swimming in a pool that's bottomless and that it has no edge, and I'm getting tired. That's what it feels like. I have nowhere to rest, because if I rest, I feel like I'll just be overcome. So I lose sleep because I can't rest, because I've got work to do. I'm in a very, very, very unique position. I'm in a very unique position as a Black man to be teaching what I teach at the academy, to be training who I train, and to be interacting with the teenagers that I do. And sometimes I feel like no one on either extreme really understands what I'm doing. But I've got to soldier on, and I've got to take my victories and take my defeats. I got to take my roses and my knocks, and so that's what I'm doing. And I'm trying to eat this elephant. I'm going to eat as much of this elephant as I can until I can't eat anymore.
And when you talk about being tired, that's what so many people have expressed over the past, over their entire lives, obviously, but especially over the past, 8 or 9 months.
Yeah.
The sense of, I'm just tired of this happening. I'm tired of constantly having to do things differently. Be conscious of, do I have my license? Do I have my ID? Am I going through my bags where somebody can see that I haven't stolen something? All those types of situations. It's just a sense of being tired. And we hear you, when you say it, it makes, even now for me anyways, I'm speaking from my own experience, and it means a lot more true to me to understand what that means than, because I've listened to people share those stories now a little bit more than what it means to be tired. But it definitely has a detrimental effect just on communities as a whole. I thank you for that wonderful, not the right word, but just the description of why one community sees, one thing, and then one community sees another thing. I think, it makes a big difference, and everybody knows, we were having this conversation in my house the other day, the OJ trial, which I'm certainly dating myself, but and you as well, Darryl. But that was,
I remember the white Bronco.
yeah. And there was certainly a lot of race involved with that as well, discrepancies of systems and who has money and who can afford 16 lawyers and all the things that are in play. And it certainly creates an enormous amount of distrust in different levels in our society. And I know I'm just repeating what's out there.
Absolutely.
Well, Ben, I think it's, you use the word distrust, right? And Darryl, you were just talking about damaging, right? How it damages the community. And for me, that's one of the biggest things. Like, we've had meetings at our university where this idea of how do we work with students that are either students of color that are coming in or just our general population, and how they can trust us coming back from a pandemic, things like that. And that's the central issue, right? Is like, can you trust the institution to protect you? Can you trust the people that you get to know in the institution to care about you? And when you talk about the example that you gave about the lynching example of what they did with the corpse, right, and how that damaged the community, I think it's poignant because it damaged the community in a way that the community members probably didn't even think about, right? In a traumatic way, in a way that is often under the surface. When you experience trauma, you often don't understand. You don't have the capability to process it at the time, right? And that's happening again to our communities today.
Yeah, another thing that I'm afraid of is, trauma is one of those things, and I'm not a psychologist. That's not my area. I'm a cop. But to me, trauma is like a neon light. Neon lights they look like they're on, but they're rapidly blinking. They're very rapidly flashing, but they flash so quickly that to the human eye, it looks like they're on. Trauma is like that. The community has been traumatized as much as Black people in America have been traumatized. It just looks like the light is always on. So there's what some people might see as a flash because they don't have as much trauma. What some people might see as a flashing light, for us, it sometimes looks like it's just on and it's just shining. And here's another example. My concern for generations that follow me, that is, unless we change this, we're going to lose a generation of young people to trauma, to community trauma. And so we need people and systems in power and people who are committing to eating that elephant one bite of the apple at a time to learn first and independently. Like, don't count on me to teach you about being an anti-racist or how racism feels. What I said about lynching is from there's a lynching museum that has a video. Yeah. You can go get it.
Yes. Yeah.
You can go get it, and anybody can go get it. Ibram X. Kendi has written volumes about how to be an anti-racist, and he lives in Boston now. People can learn. So I say learn and learn independently, and then listen, and then ask questions. Ask good questions. Ask questions like, I want to understand how this feels to you. This is what it looks like to me. Be daring. Take a risk. I have a friend who takes risks. He's white, but he takes risks. Darryl, this is what this looks like to me. What does it look like from your perspective? I love that question. I love it because I'm able to, it's one bite of the elephant. I'm able to say, this is what this particular situation you're asking me about looks like to me. And so those kinds of things for me are refreshing. They make the edge of the pool seem closer. They make it feel like I can almost put my foot at the bottom of the pool. They make me feel better about bringing two beautiful, intelligent, capable young women into the world with my wife. We have two great daughters. They're awesome. So I think learning, then listening, and then asking. That's the advice I always give folks who say, what can I do? And then after you ask, act. Say something. Call bad. When something is wrong and racist, call it wrong and racist. It's not a risk to you. You're not giving up some position as a white person by saying that is racist. By acknowledging racism exists is like acknowledging the heat is off in the house. You can deny it all you want, but your feet are still going to get cold at night without the covers. You know what I mean? So, so I always say, learn, listen, ask, and act.
Those are great words. I had another question here that was going to, focus on, some other statistics, but I think it's segued very well into the next part of this, which I'm going to just segue right into. I think you've outlined enough situations where people can see the discrepancies in the criminal justice system and some of those that exist. So, because we're not here we want to do two things. We want to, like you say, we want to share some information about the way racism exists in this case in criminal justice. But what can we do? And I say we as a whole, as what can be done to better our communities? What can we do in the criminal justice system to make our communities stronger? I've got some ideas as well, but some of it's based on research and other things like that. But just from somebody who's as active in the community, both professionally and personally as you are, what are some things that you can do, or that can be done? Sorry, not you, but that can be done to strengthen our communities when it comes to the criminal justice system?
Well, I think for the common everyday individual, my big thing is eat the apple one bite at a time. I would tell themselves, question, it's really easy to say we want to help Black community, but then to feel a little funny when you see two Black kids walking down the street in front of your own house, right? It's really easy to say, I want to help the Black community. And then, you're driving down the street and you see two Black men in a lowrider Toyota and they're blasting their music. I would say it starts with the individual. It starts, first of all, for parents, it starts at the kitchen table. Kids will always magnify, because they're not sophisticated, they'll magnify the little nuances of racism that you mention at the kitchen table. You say, honey, there were two Black kids on the street today, and automatically Black is bad. And they're going to grow up having that experience. So challenge your own racism. And that's for Black and white people. Black people we have to challenge our own racism. Right now, I live a pretty comfortable middle-class existence. And I have to, like with this young man that came to the academy, I could have easily judged him and not accessed the fact that he reminds me of me in a bygone day. I could have easily said, who does this young man think he is? I'm going to show him who's boss, blah, 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 blah. I think that we need to start questioning ourselves. Racism comes home. Racism isn't only a systemic issue. It comes to your house, and it comes to your own heart and your own mind and your own mouth. And I think that individuals who want to change, you need to change yourself. You need to change how you think of people. There are lots of people who claim to be liberal juggernauts, right? Who just want to change the world, but they tuck their purse to the other side when they see a Black guy walking at you. And I get followed in Best Buy. Like 55-year-old, glasses wearing, cop for 32 years, I get followed in Best Buy. When I first got on the job, I was pulling people over like crazy. Like when I first got in the car by myself, I'm doing 25 violations every day. And somebody said, why are you doing that? I said, yeah, because everybody gets pulled over 5 or 6 times a year by the police. I just want to keep up. I want to do my part. And someone said, nobody gets pulled over 5 or 6 times a year by the police. And I said, I do. Black people do. So this stuff comes home. It comes home in a very real way. We can't, and to white and to Black people of a certain class, I'm saying be the right human being when the opportunity to be racist comes home, because it will for all of us. Your house is broken into, and you automatically think of a certain kind of person. There's somebody knocking at your door, and they're the wrong color or the right color, depending on how you look at Blackness, and you automatically have a certain kind of thought. Somebody is mean to your kid at school, and you start asking, what did they look like? And some people ask that what did they look like question, trying to discern whether that person was an ethnic minority. So racism, be the right person when racism comes home, and then start acting on destroying this ugly beast of racism. And it's huge. It's as old as this country is. And so everybody needs to take their bite of the apple. Take the one that comes home.
How does that translate? And you say that very well. How does that translate to, that's a huge first step, the dinner table conversations, having, and rethinking and how you're thinking. How does that then translate the next step to something practical about, if you will, the criminal justice system? Like, how does are we starting to perceive people differently then and starting to recognize things that have been happening once you start having those conversations? Is that kind of where you're leading towards?
Yeah, I think so. I think that we start having those conversations. We equip a generation at a time. Here's a crazy example. My daughters will eat anything. They will eat any kind of ethnic food that is put in front of them without turning up their noses. And if they don't like it, they'll say, you know what? I don't care for this dish. Can I try something else? Because from early in their lives, we began explaining to them that to not eat someone's food because it doesn't look familiar to you can be very hurtful. And because of how my wife and I live our lives, we have many friends of many ethnicities. So we didn't want our kids to turn up their noses at one of our international type friends' homes if we've gotten invited over. And so what that turned into, with that cultural curiosity that we produced in my daughters, just with what they ate, what that turned into was a real cultural curiosity that they took to school with them. And they brought it home, and they challenged and changed me in some of the areas that I lacked a cultural curiosity. So now there's 4 of us in this little family that are brave, and that will challenge systems, and that will question systems. And my wife is a Boston public school teacher. My oldest daughter is just got into a graduate program to be a school psychologist. My youngest daughter is still figuring it out, but we fully trust that she's going to be a super impactful human being, and her kids are going to be impactful human beings, and they're going to change this world. We do believe that one person can change the world. We do. And we're seeing it played out in real time with my career, my wife's career, and hopefully their own. And it started at the kitchen table.
I got, I appreciate you, all the thoughts you shared. I got some other questions, but I think we're good on that. I think
you wrapped it up in a very beautiful way. I think you really hit the right notes. It's one of these, this is one of the topics that we could talk on all day. I'm so glad that you touched earlier about what you have done in your department, and the things that you've been able to spearhead, and the ways that you have influenced others around you, and that there's hope in that, right? That there's future in that for everybody in our communities. And, you talk about, once you retire, I mean, you've established this legacy. And I hope that continues as you've intended it to, because then the folks that you have trained will then train others to be doing the right things, to make the right choice as a person, like you said. And so I think you wrapped it up in a really concise way for us today. And I was honored to have the conversation with you, Darryl. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I just want to say thank you again.
It's my pleasure. I think I think I want to say one more thing. So today I spoke as Darryl Owens, the human being. I am not representing the Boston Police Department or its views. I am not representing our mayor or his views. Right now, Marty Walsh is still in office. That's not what I'm doing. Ben is my friend. Ben makes some of the best ribs I've ever tasted. And he hooks me up every time he makes some. And so I'm making a plug for myself right there. But I'm doing this for my friend, and all the success and impact I've been able to have, it's because of the people who helped me out when I was that broken and damaged kid who without a father in the inner city. It's because of protection from that and protection from forces beyond this world that I'm able to do what I do. So it's very humbling. It's still very almost comical to me to say I've been a cop for almost 32 years. But I plan to keep shining this little light of mine until it's blown out.
And I'm going to Darryl, that you, I think you know this, probably would never admit it though, but I've always considered you to kind of be like the statesman of our neighborhood, of our part of neighborhood and stuff. Like everybody knows Darryl and knows who he is and don't mess around with Darryl, not because they don't want to disappoint Darryl.
Yeah.
Or things like that. And we all go to Darryl when we have some questions or some things like that in the neighborhood. But I will say this too, from what I know of you, and I hear it in your voice a little bit that your retirement is a little down the road. Just because you retire, I have a feeling that you're not done.
No.
And I think that, that goes back to what you're talking about being human, that you do what you do because you love it, because it's impactful and it's because it's meaningful. And whether you're doing that at the academy or you retire and you're finding other ways to do it with your other community endeavors, I think that's what really drew me to you for this, not only because of your experience, but because you are a true community member and recognize your part in it, that you are a part and that you have a responsibility to the community, and not just to the people you know, but to everybody who's in that community as well, the good and the bad. Right. And it's not always good and bad, but the different levels that exist. Yep. And I think that's why we really wanted to talk with you about community, and we wanted to talk to you about criminal justice, but I think the better portion of this was really just your membership, your statements, your thoughts on what it means to be a member of the community, which is really the reason why Jay and I are doing this. It's about anti-racism, but it's also about people's commitment to the community, which is about other people and thinking about other people. And it's, when people talk about why are you engaging in anti-racist activities? Why are you here at this meeting? Well, I've heard people say, because I want to do my job better. I want to advise students better. I want to teach students better. Or it's not, for Jay and I at the very least, and I know it's for you, Darryl, it's not about doing my job better. It's just about being a better human being and learning how to interact with people differently and owning up to when I've screwed up and not even realized it. And it's all those things so you can treat people better and create a better environment, even if it's one bite at a time, like you're saying, Darryl. I think that's the key piece with this whole idea of the podcast that we're doing. There are pockets and there are systems, but it's how you treat people. And I think if anybody takes anything away from this podcast today, Darryl, it's your words of advice about how to treat other people, regardless of their situations. And so I'll say thank you for that. And I will take care of the ribs, I promise.
Great. Well, that's all I needed to hear. Thank you, guys.
All right.
It's been great to be with you.
All right, Darryl.
Thanks so much. For more information on the topics we discussed in this episode, you can visit these resources. For more information about our support resources here at Framingham State, you can visit these offices.
We'd like to thank Buyer Ads for their technical support, as well as NASPA Region 1 for their generous financial support. And of course, we'd also like to thank the Offices of Community Standards and New Student and Family Programs on the Framingham State campus for making this happen.